All right, so it's 12:05. I wanted to go ahead and get started, be mindful of our time. So I wanted to welcome everyone to Chicago Check's virtual community conversation on nutrition, physical activity, self-care for those impacted by cancer during COVID-19. Thank you so much for joining today's conversation on these topics. We look forward to hearing from everyone regarding your experiences and challenges. And we've also got a couple great experts on the call to answer any questions you might have. I'm Alicia Kalamian. I'm a community health educator with Chicago Check at NEIU. This event is brought to you by Chicago Cancer Health Equity Collaborative, also known as Chicago Check. We are an NIH-funded grant that collaborates with Northwestern University, University of Illinois at Chicago, Northeastern Illinois University, and various community partners. We aim to support cancer health equity in Chicago through research, training, education, and community engagement. I also wanted to give a special thanks to Wellness House for their collaboration with us in today's session. Their mission is to see a community where all people affected by cancer thrive, and their programs are offered at no cost and as a complement to medical treatment, and aim to educate, support, and empower their participants so they will improve their physical and emotional well-being. Next slide. I also wanted to let you guys know we have another upcoming virtual conversation in November that will be talking about the challenges and benefits of telehealth for those touched by cancer and how to make the best out of your telehealth experience during COVID. And we do have a guest speaker for that, Nicole Gastala. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. So if you guys would like, stay tuned for some more information to come regarding that. And before I move on to introducing our wonderful experts, I did want to go over a couple housekeeping tips. Please keep yourself muted while others are talking during the discussion portion of this session, just to make sure that we all, give each other the respect of, being able to hear each other, allowing others to speak. And if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them in the chat box. And now, moving on to our fabulous experts that will be kicking us off in today's discussion. We have Jaden Chapman, who is an oncology exercise specialist with Wellness House. We also have Angela Dennison, a nutrition program manager at Wellness House, and Dr. Maiganet Mengesha, senior oncologist support counselor at Wellness House. So I will be passing the floor on to these wonderful folks to share some of the information they brought with us, and will be followed by a open discussion so that we can hear about your experiences, challenges, and any questions you might have for them. So with that, I will pass it over to our wonderful experts.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction, Alicia. Thank you for the opportunity to collaborate. Chicago Check is an amazing organization, and we're just so happy to be able to join you all today. So as Alicia mentioned, my name is Maiganet Mengesha, and I have the wonderful privilege of being a panelist with my great colleagues, which is actually a true representation of what Wellness House offers, which is a holistic model of care. So the portion of the presentation that I'll be focusing on is more of the social and emotional health. And it was suggested that maybe to get some applicable social emotional into practice, that we would start out with a mindfulness. So that's actually what I'm going to do. So I'm going to walk through a script of mindfulness, and then afterwards talk about why it's really important to try to incorporate it into your day, as well as some other strategies and tips to minimize stress during this intersection of a pandemic and cancer and mental health. So really appreciate you taking the time to be a part of this, this presentation, and I hope you enjoy it. So as I mentioned, creating space in the day to kind of stop and calm down and kind of really quiet the worries that many of us are having is, it's one of those things that we can often overlook because, you know, the mind is racing, so much to be uncertain about during this time. And so this activity, mindfulness meditation, it's called a lot of different things. But really the idea is, kind of the science behind it is just to kind of quiet the mind, right? Which seems super complex, but it's a small activity that you can do in 5 minutes, in 40 minutes, you know, for those that are maybe a little bit more seniored in it. We're just going to do a really brief couple-minute exercise, okay? So the acronym of this specific meditation is STOP, S-T-O-P, and I'm going to walk you through each of those steps. No need to worry. All you have to do is just follow my voice, okay? The S is for stop. Stop what you're doing right now. Get in a comfortable position, either seated, lying down, eyes open, eyes closed. Just find yourself getting comfortable. The T is for take. Take a few deep breaths. Breathe in through the nose initially, and then out through the mouth. With each exhale, allow your body to soften a bit. As long as you're here with the breath right now, allow your body to settle in its natural rhythm of breathing. Breathing in, feeling the sense, and then breathing out. Breath out, and sense the breath going in and out. Allowing your body to take the breath it needs to get to its natural rhythm of being alive. The O is for observe. Begin to observe your body, noticing if there's any tension or tightness anywhere, including the face. If you do notice any of that, just allow it to soften, or just mindfully adjust your body as it feels that it needs it. Be aware of how you're feeling emotionally right now. Is there a sense of calm or ease? Maybe some restlessness, irritation, maybe sadness. Are you just feeling neutral? Whatever you're feeling, just be aware of it. Notice how it feels physically in your body. Continue to observe yourself physically and emotionally in this moment, just letting things be. Be aware of and observe your mind right now. Noticing, does it seem distracted or cluttered? Does it seem like it's kind of settling into being there? Either way, it's okay. The O again is simply to observe, is just to allow us to be aware of our experience in the moment, physically, emotionally, and mentally. The moment we notice that our mind is off, settle in, be aware of the fullness of your experience, again, physically, emotionally, and mentally, and just let it be. The P is for proceed, and just asking the question of what's most important for me to pay attention to right now? Or what am I needing right now? Allow whatever answer there is to simply arise. Proceed with that in the next moment. Always remember to acknowledge yourself for taking this time. This is a great act of self-care, and take the final moment to acknowledge yourself for taking this time. So as you're beginning to open your eyes and just kind of reflect on whatever came up for you, whether it's physical or emotional, I just want to thank you for participating in this mindfulness activity and also for being a part of this presentation today. It says a lot about who you are as a person and your desire to want to be the best you, even during all of this stressful times. So thank you to all of you. So again, that was just a little taste, a little appetizer of sorts of a mindfulness activity. There are so many wonderful resources out there. And actually, there's a lot of resources that are available even on apps. A lot of them are offered at free right now because of the pandemic. And because there's recognition that mindfulness and meditation is an effective tool for reducing and minimizing stress. So now I'm going to transition into 9 tips to minimize stress while managing cancer during the coronavirus or COVID-19 pandemic. One way to reduce stress and anxiety is to really limit exposure to things that trigger anxiety. Much easier said than done. But if we are aware of things that we're doing that may be heightening our anxiety, we can in fact perhaps reduce the amount of time we watch the news, maybe avoid that friend who tends to be more panicky or tends to maybe be more extreme in their thoughts, right? If we're noticing that those are the times that our anxiety is elevated, maybe we want to reduce those activities. The second one is to do a reality check. How do our anxious thoughts really differ from information provided by the experts? And I think it's important now to just note that there's so much information out there, and not all of it is reliable. And so if we want to keep with our secured experts, mainly our oncologists and the CDC, the Center for Disease and Control, we should be matching our thoughts with what we know to be true, right? So we want to stay away from the blogs and the Facebook if we're trying to really get accurate information. The third tip is to practice relaxation techniques, such as the one that we started our presentation out with today. Deep breathing or meditation, yoga, or Tai Chi, or maybe you have some other relaxation exercises. You know, there's a lot of things that we can do to reduce the stress, even if we're looking at photos. That's something a lot of people are doing right now, is looking at photos from previous years, and just remembering the joy that we had maybe with a friend or on a visit or something like that. But a simple act of kind of grounding yourself and looking for things that bring you joy is in itself mindfulness, being mindful. Talking to others. So mental health professionals, family or friends, about your feelings and worrisome thoughts. What we do know is that keeping those feelings inside can really lead to more serious physical and mental health consequences. We at Wellness House have a host of programs that are available, as Alicia mentioned, at no charge, and you don't even have to leave your bedroom if you don't want to. And so whether that's a cancer-specific program or a program for young adults or a spiritual side, whatever really is your thing, we likely have a program. So to get with other folks that are like-minded, that really can join in and validate who you are, you know, especially when we're not able to access, you know, our loved ones right now, is so important. So check us out. The fifth one is eating healthy. So my wonderful colleagues are going to talk about the importance of eating healthy and exercise. So I'm going to leave that to both Jade and Angela to kind of dig deep into. The seventh one is to get a good night's sleep. Sleep hygiene is so important. It's really hard to do anything, function in any way without proper sleep, right? So what we know for those of us that have kids, that they have a bedtime routine, and it's prepping the body and the mind for sleep. We adults are no different. We need that too. So whether that's reading a book or journaling, or maybe you practice your meditation before you go to bed, or maybe it's taking a bath or lighting a candle, aromatherapy can be powerful. Whatever your routine is, to really think about that, whatever can quiet and ground you and get you prepared for sleep, is medicine in and of itself. The eighth one is to use social media. This one is a really important one. Use social media or Zoom or Skype or WhatsApp to maintain a sense of connection, even though we're not seeing each other in person. What we do know is that, especially for folks of color, that there is an extra sense of loneliness that can be experienced. And it's heightened during these times of a pandemic. And so to be away from our Sunday meals with our families, to not be able to, you know, cook dinner with our friends, or whatever your routines might be, to try to incorporate those into in a virtual sense, so that you can still tap into being a part of and feeling that sense of connection that's so important for all of us, and that's also really heightened for folks of color. And then the ninth one is that it's really difficult to tease out clinical depression and anxiety from cancer fatigue and now from COVID fatigue. And I just want to urge you to not feel like you have to do that alone, that there are experts and professionals who are trained to help you piece that out. And so Wellness House is a great organization. NAMI is a great organization, and the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and they have wonderful resources that and staff that are available. So I just wanted to mention those things. And I'm now going to pass the baton on to our next guest speaker.
Hi there. My name is Angela. I am the registered dietitian at Wellness House, and I am excited to talk to you guys about nutrition during this time as we are navigating COVID-19 and then also, having a cancer diagnosis. There's always a lot of, potential concern and fear around food. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about things that we can do and focus on right now. And Alicia, are you able to share my document? Thank you.
You got it. Give me 1 second. I'll get
All
that on
right.
the screen for you.
And Mike and Annette, thank you so much for that lovely relaxation session. That was wonderful. I needed that. So
Yes.
I appreciate that very, very much. All right, so that's getting pulled up. I'll just kind of start to dive into this information. And so right now, there is a big focus on keeping our immune system strong and focusing on anti-inflammatory foods. And, I kind of wanted to dive into that to talk about things that we can do kind of on a daily basis and ongoing. When it comes to really keeping a strong immune system, I often hear the term, how do I boost this, right? We kind of have this idea that one food or nutrient can suddenly give us this boost in immunity and protection. And one thing I want to mention is, practices that we put into place on a regular basis is what will really help maintain that healthy immune system. So eating healthy food along with adequate sleep, exercise, managing stress, all the things that we're talking about today can really help maintain that strong immune system and help manage that chronic inflammation. And when it comes to what we eat, there are some things that we'll hone in on, but when we presented previously, we really talked about, plant foods. So all of our plants, like, our fruits and vegetables and whole grains and nuts and seeds and beans, lentils, those really, really great plant foods. Those are the foods that are really heavily focused on and recommended we eat on a regular basis to help support a healthy immune system. And we do know that, nutrition can play a role in our immunity. And also, the immunity plays a role to our risk and severity of infection. So even though there's not a ton of data to support nutrition and COVID-19, still the recommendations are to really focus on, healthy intake as much as we can and creating that balance in our diet. So those who are maybe, more poorly nourished or maybe don't get enough of these plant foods in their diet, we know that can impact our immunity and increase risk for, different types of infections. All right, so let's kind of talk about supporting our immune system. Like I said, it's a lot of foods in their, they work with one another. Every time we eat a variety of foods, we kind of have this really lovely synergistic effect. And even though one food or nutrient isn't that magical answer, there are some nutrients that have been pinpointed as, good things to keep in mind and start to incorporate on a daily basis. Now, foods with vitamin C acts as an antioxidant and it helps limit inflammation in the body and can potentially help with tissue damage in the body. And these are some of your heavy hitters of vitamin C in the plant world. You can still find vitamin C in a wide variety of other foods, and typically oranges are our go-to. But I have to tell you, red bell peppers have the most vitamin C kind of like in that plant kingdom. Just a cup of red bell peppers gives you over 100% of your daily needs of vitamin C. And, these are kind of the foods almost in order of their vitamin C content. And of course, we know orange juice and oranges. If you were to pick between the juice and the orange, I do highly recommend you go with the orange itself because it does contain the fiber and it's kind of, that whole food item. But, strawberries and broccoli and Brussels sprouts and, so all of these are wonderful foods that you can include. So no matter what kind of dietary path or, what you're following right now, if you're cooking for yourself or your loved ones, these are all really great nourishing foods to incorporate. Zinc has also been identified as a nutrient to make sure we're getting adequate amounts of. We know those that those who don't have adequate zinc levels, we know that may, it may have an effect on our immune system and our ability to respond to infections. And so these are foods that have a lot of zinc in them. So there's not a ton of plant foods that are really rich in zinc. But these are the foods like oysters, crab, beef. If you are a beef consumer, for cancer protection, and it's recommended that you consume no more than 18 ounces in a week. And baked beans, and beans are a wonderful thing to include on a regular basis, and some fortified cereals. If you're unsure at any point that you're not getting enough zinc, you can connect with your medical team. So if you're thinking about a supplement, always talk to your doctors. And vitamin D is also something that has been pinpointed. So we live in the Midwest and we typically do not get enough vitamin D. It's very, very common. Normally vitamin D is produced in our skin when we're exposed to sunlight. And those with darker skin actually tend to synthesize less vitamin D. So again, it's good to talk to your doc to discuss whether or not you do need a supplement. There's not a ton of foods that naturally have vitamin D. But trout, salmon, and mushrooms are really interesting in the fact that when they are exposed to UV light, just like us, they synthesize vitamin D. So if you enjoy mushrooms, which again, those are really another great immune boosting food, look for the package that says grown under a UV light, because then it can be a good source of vitamin D for you. And also kind of looking at keeping the healthy bacteria in our gut happy. There's a lot of research regarding, the microbiome and, the key role it plays in our immune system. And the gut is a major site of immune activity for us. We are actually doing, we have a virtual nutrition fair coming up. It kicks off Saturday, November 7th. We have a wonderful guest speaker coming, Bryant Terry, who wrote The Vegetable Kingdom. But that following week, we have a lot of follow-up nutrition presentations. Also, Mike Gannett will be presenting on community and food as well. And we'll send you information following this presentation. But we do have a presentation on gut health. So if you want to learn more about that, that would be a great opportunity. But when we're thinking about our gut health, having foods that are rich in probiotics, things like kefir, which is pretty much just a drinkable yogurt, and then yogurt with live cultures, fermented veggies, sauerkraut, tempeh, kombucha, kimchi, miso, those are really great foods that contain probiotics. And to keep those probiotics nice and happy and well fed, we want to eat foods with prebiotics. Now, what I want to say about that is all of the plant foods in the plant kingdom have fiber. So essentially, those are going to be great sources for you to keep a healthy gut flora. But these prebiotics listed are kind of some that are, really identified to be kind of, again, those like heavy hitters with helping feed that healthy bacteria. Things like garlic and onions, leeks, asparagus, Jerusalem artichokes, dandelion greens, bananas, seaweed. But also you just want to think of variety, because everything in the plant world will help with this. Now, some of these prebiotic foods listed, if you introduce them suddenly, if these aren't regular foods in your diet, they can cause a little bit of digestive upset. So I want you to be mindful of that. If you start to incorporate any of these foods, do in small amounts, assess your tolerance. And as you continue to increase them in your diet and you get used to them, you can see your tolerance start to improve over time. But I do recommend you go slow when introducing high fibered foods, just because we all tolerate fiber a little bit differently. And anti-inflammatory foods, this is an interesting topic, because on one hand, inflammation is a healthy process that our body uses to heal. But what always comes to concern is when we have that chronic inflammation, when we have inflammation that persists, that's when we can potentially see damage to healthy tissue. And chronic inflammation can happen for a variety of reasons. It can be, our genetic makeup, but it can also be from different lifestyle choices. And so, including more anti-inflammatory foods into your intake can be helpful with that. I've listed some omega-3s, which are an essential fatty acid. Those are known to be anti-inflammatory. Some really great green leafy vegetables, things like tea and berries, onions, tomatoes, oranges, cherries, a variety of herbs and spices. Turmeric has been really identified as being an anti-inflammatory spice. So whether you're getting the fresh root or the ground spice, always add a pinch of black pepper, you guys, because the compound in turmeric, which is curcumin, we absorb it way better when we add a little bit of black pepper. So I do want to be mindful of the time, and I'll really quick just mention a couple of other things, and then I will pass that on to Jaden to talk about exercise, and we can get to your questions. And when it comes to, boosting up a plant intake, I know there's always some kind of concerns about maybe it's not exciting, or maybe, it kind of lacks certain flavors, but, how we cook with our plants and how we flavor our foods can really just go such a long way. So with your cooking methods, with your vegetables, I recommend you don't boil them. Boiling not only is not a good flavor component, but it also leaches a ton of nutrients out of your food. So you would be better off with steaming, roasting, healthy saute, and that does help enhance the flavors. And I also did incorporate some money and time savers for you guys to look at. And if at any point you have questions about these, if you need individualized nutrition support, I know you're all unique in your own right. You have a different diagnosis, different treatment, different surgeries, and that can absolutely play a role with how you tolerate your foods or what foods you're able to eat at that time. Please connect with me and we can talk about that. We can put something into action for you. Thank you so much again for joining us and having me today, and I will go ahead and pass it along to Jaden.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you to both Meganette and Angela for providing great tips to the community about self-care and nutrition. So I am delighted to talk to you all a little bit about exercise, the importance of exercise, not only for us in normal times, but now that's compounded right by the pandemic. So we could even say that exercise is more important now than ever before. And Angela mentioned the immune system quite a few times during her presentation, and I want to talk a little bit about that too. And I do apologize for the title at the top. It got cut off. It should say tips for staying active during COVID-19, not CO. But it's more important now than ever to be staying active, to move your body in a way that works for you. We know that there is a large impact on our immune system when we exercise. It does boost our immune system. That is evidence-based, so that's a large focus, I think, for people during this pandemic is how do I keep my immune system strong? And any movement that you're doing is going to help not only fight off infection, like Angela mentioned, but help in the recovery process and help in the recovery process with your muscles as you exercise. While exercise won't prevent you from getting the virus, exercise does have other protective effects like improved immune system, but also improved mood. We see a lot of cognitive benefits as well with exercise and better sleep quality. So for people, after a cancer experience or they've been diagnosed with cancer, many people want to make positive lifestyle changes in their lives, and things like self-care, nutrition, and adding physical activity is a great way to kind of boost your self-care action plan. It is completely normal to feel less motivated during these times to stay active, especially if activity or adopting an exercise program has been challenging for you in the past. So I do, challenge you to give yourself grace in this time, and I just want to say that it's totally normal if you're feeling less motivated. But with that being said, and what's very promising is even small changes can make a lasting impact on your health. So even if you start to go out for one walk a week and say you haven't been walking at all, that is a positive change towards better health. So even those small changes we want to celebrate. Something is always better than nothing. You want to choose the right activity as well for yourself to reduce the risk of injury. You want it to be something that you enjoy. So if you know, okay, I will probably go for a walk instead of going for a bike or a run, then go for that walk. Any activity that you choose is going to be beneficial, and if it's something that you like, you are more likely to stick with that and to enjoy the process. You also want to choose the right intensity according to your health status and fitness level. Also keep in mind of any comorbidities or disabilities, right, you might be experiencing. There are a lot of different things that you can do seated in a chair. For example, marching in place or extending your legs out, doing some arm circles are all great things that you can do seated in a chair if walking isn't accessible or doable for you. You'll want to start with shorter amounts, like 5 to 10 minutes of exercise, and gradually build up to more minutes. The American Cancer Society does recommend that you try to aim for 30 minutes of moderate aerobic activity per week. Moderate just means that you feel an increase in your breathing rate and your heart rates, but you're still able to have a conversation with someone. So moderate intensity exercise can look very different person to person. And we work with you here at Wellness House to help you determine what activities are considered moderate for you. We'll talk to you about your cancer experience and how your fitness level or activity level has changed after your diagnosis, and provide individualized tips and classes to help you become more active. It's also really important to stay in touch with an online fitness community and really use the technology to our advantage. I think prior to COVID, we didn't understand how we can really use technology to our advantage to stay connected. But we have seen in the fitness world that the technology has really been a pandemic positive for us, because we're able to provide this experience for people all across different states. And even in some cases, different countries. So finding that online community, Wellness House brings that online community to you, where all you have to do is log on to an internet source, plug into the class, and you can take that class with others who are experiencing a lot of the same things as you are, with an expert there to guide you through the process. I also recommend, designating a space in your home to kind of be your active space. So we know a lot of people are starting to, adopt in-home exercise programs. We know that that is the safest place to be right now. You don't need a lot of room in your house, but just kind of start looking around and designating a space in your home to be kind of your active space. Make sure that you check for objects that may pose a risk of harm, so you might need to rearrange, but it could just be a small corner of a room. You can even set out, any equipment that you might be using, like a yoga mat, or, there are a lot of things that you can do without equipment, but you can kind of just set up your space so that the next day you don't have to think about, where am I going to do these activities? It's already set up for you. And you're also prepping yourself mentally just by setting that space up and taking a step forward to making that healthy choice the next day to do that activity. Tracking your activity is really important. I think keeping an exercise journal is really a great idea. Putting things from pen to paper is just a huge step in making any behavior changes. It just means that you're thinking about it. So if you are taking that step to write things down and to jot notes down, that's a wonderful first step. You can record things like activity time or number of steps. If you like to record your steps, there are very inexpensive things that you can purchase, like pedometers, for anywhere from $10 to $20. Very simple. If you have access to a smartphone, there are a lot of apps that you can use to help track your steps, but those could be two things that you track that would be really helpful to look back on, just to kind of see trends and kind of what your typical number of steps is like. You can also take it a step further, which I think is really great, in recording any challenges. What barriers did you face? What are some things that went well? So if you went for a walk today, just putting that on paper and using that as a reminder to yourself that you did that thing that you said that you were going to do, and then jotting down how that made you feel. I think sometimes if we look back to the why we do things, that really helps us, continue to do that, because we can remember that experience was very positive and tap into the why of why I went out for a walk and how you felt after. I do want to be mindful of time, so I'll share just a few more tips here. So sneaking movement into your routine, like the everyday chores, things that can just seem very monotonous and boring, I love to spice up with some activity. So if I'm waiting for something in the microwave, for example, instead of just going back and sitting on the couch, I might walk up and down the stairs of my workplace. Again, if that isn't doable for you, and you need to stay in a chair, you could march in place or stand and march in place, or do, some simple arm circles or something like that, while you're waiting for something to be done. Also, any like large household chores like scrubbing, sweeping, and dusting all add up. So those are forms of physical activity. So if we think of, our chores being a way to keep our bodies moving and active, maybe you'll enjoy them a little bit more, maybe not, but I like to kind of think of ways to make it a little bit more fun. Let's see, following your body's rhythms is another tip. Planning your activity time during moments you are feeling your best. I know Meganette mentioned anxiety and the stress that we're feeling. If there's a particular time of the day that you are going to feel more depleted or more fatigued, then you would avoid activity during those times and really capitalize on the moments you're feeling better. Maybe that's when you wake up in the morning, you haven't checked your social media yet or the news yet, and you can get your activity done during that time, kind of when you're feeling your best. And rewarding yourself often. So I really believe in this and giving yourself grace during this time. Our current situation makes it very difficult to partake in a lot of our favorite forms of exercise or movement or a connection, and it can be very frustrating. So, don't beat yourself up. Instead, focus on how much better you'll feel after moving and just maybe changing some of those things that you would typically do in a group space to fit our current circumstances, and just finding very simple ways to reward yourself for the small things that you've accomplished. And finally, I just want to note that you always want to delay exercise if you're feeling unwell. Follow up with your healthcare provider. Let your exercise specialist know too of any things that you are feeling. If we need to modify your program, we love to hear from our participants, especially now online. It's a little bit harder to connect. So if you are interested in learning more about our exercise program, I'm going to put my contact information into the chat box, so you can give me a call or email to set up a consultation. And the consultation would just be an initial conversation. So we go over some of the things that I mentioned in the beginning. There's no pressure to sign up for any classes, but sometimes, the first step to getting started is just talking to someone who understands and can support you.
Thank you so much, you guys, for all of the wonderful information that you've shared with us today, and we're so grateful for you all to be here. At this time, we did permit everybody to be able to unmute themselves. So if anybody had any questions, experiences, challenges that they'd like to share, we welcome that at this time. So we open the floor to everybody on this call to really allow, any kind of information you had any questions about. And I will just cut myself off there because I love talking, and I love talking to such a wonderful group of people. So at this time, I will go ahead and pass the floor on to anyone who has any questions. So I did have a few questions kind of on my end too, Jaden. I was wondering maybe if you could talk about how does blood flow help with the healing, and what exercises increase blood flow, if maybe there's some information that would be helpful for that.
Yeah, great question. So blood circulation actually transports our nutrients throughout the body, so very important process. It helps manage waste production and improves muscle recovery after a workout, which accelerates healing. And healthy circulation is really important because it maximizes these functions by improving blood flow via vessels, arteries, veins, and capillaries. And anytime that our circulation is compromised by disease or other factors, our muscles can easily atrophy. So that just means muscle wasting. And numbness and tingling can frequently occur from limited circulation. Infections can develop more easily. And poor circulation increases risk for serious health threats, including stroke, hypertension, and even kidney failure. But when we exercise, our body is actually like a pump. So we're pumping blood flow through our tissues. So our tissues are easily able to respond to the stress of exercise. And over time, we actually see a change in the efficiency of our heart. So just like the other muscles in our bodies, our heart is a muscle. So the more we exercise, the stronger our heart is. It can beat fewer times by producing more blood and circulation to our tissues with each beat. So a strong heart means better blood flow with less work. So we'll start to feel more energized. Our stamina increases, our cardiovascular system increases, which all helps the healing process.
Thank you. So I know kind of to share a personal story a bit for me, you know, earlier in September, I ended up having COVID and I'm doing good and everyone around me is doing good. But I did, you know, I know not only myself had experienced this, but a lot of people who do end up having COVID have this fatigue that they experience and not wanting to get up and move around. And, you know, I was lucky enough to have, you know, I have a nurse in my family. So she was like, don't sit around and do stuff. So I feel like, you know, what you're saying with getting the blood flow going and helping with that healing process, you know, I had heard it from her, but, you know, I think it's great to hear it also from, you know, someone who works more on this end of things as well, because, you know, I feel like I was very stuck into my bed and I didn't want to move around and I felt very fatigued, but making myself just do a couple laps around my kitchen or doing something just to get moving. But I didn't know if there was any other like at-home exercises maybe you could recommend that would help other people that, you know, might not be at their fullest health potential, but still helping them get that blood circulation up and helping them, you know, with the healing process, whether it's, you know, cancer related or COVID related.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great question. So there are so many different things that you can do and that we do in our classes, right, to improve blood flow and circulation. So if you're in a chair, you know, seated marches are one of my favorite things that I can do. Maybe I can set this up so you can see. I'll try. So we'll sit back into the chair. But just sitting into your chair, I know you can't see my legs, so maybe I'll cut my head off and you can see my legs a little bit more. But one of my favorite things to get the blood flowing is literally just marching in your chair. So sitting up nice and tall, stacking your shoulders, drawing your belly button in, and just marching in place. And you can do this at a comfortable pace, of course. You can go a little bit faster if you want a little bit more of a challenge. You can even add some arm movements to this. So you're lifting your knees up and circulating your arms. So just very small, you know, movements like that. You can do it standing. So for those who aren't concerned about their balance, right, who, you know, can stand and want to be standing more, they can do those marches in place, walking, like you said, around the house, walking upstairs, anytime that you have the option to take the stairs and you feel comfortable and safe to do that, making that choice to take the stairs is important because just that small you know, activity adds up over time, and you'll find that, you know, each time you start taking the stairs instead of, you know, the elevator, if you have the opportunity. But there are so many different things that you can do. Just think of anything that gets your heart rate up. You know, you can reach your arms up, reach your arms down. You know, you can do 10 or 20 of those even at your chair. So for those who are working at a desk, those are some great things that you can do too throughout the day if you find that you've been sitting all day. Another thing that you can think about too is just how you're sitting and your posture. So I know a lot of us like to cross our legs and then we start to kind of round the shoulders forward. So anytime you can uncross your legs, be very mindful of even how you are sitting into your chair. That is really helpful, and you're actually expending energy as well just by holding your body in that correct kind of posture position.
As you're saying that, I'm like, oh, I need to sit a little bit nicer in my chair and doing all of these things. So did anyone else in the audience, have any questions, any experiences that they'd like to share with the group?
I do have a follow-up question for you, Jaden. So do you have any advice or recommendations to give anyone who is just not motivated at all to do any kind of physical activity, even if it's physical activity that requires just sitting in a chair? So this is something that I've been struggling with my grandma. So she's actually going through cancer treatment right now, and on top of cancer, she also has diabetes. So she has a lot of swelling in her lower limbs, and one of the things that we're trying to get her to do is to move around a little bit more, just so that it can help increase her circulation in her lower limbs. But this is something that's really difficult for her, and even the smallest of movements she is not up to doing. So I was just wondering, do you have any tips, or is there anything that you might recommend?
That's a great question, Melissa, and I think something that a lot of people experience. So a few things that, I could recommend is maybe for her she feels like she can't do a ton of different things, but is there one thing, right, that she can think of that she can do? Because sometimes when we say you need to be exercising, people know that they should be doing more, but it's just hard for them. So even if she's spending a lot of time laying down, can she sit up just for a few minutes of the day? And supporting her and making just a very small change. And I think surrounding her with people, you all seem very supportive, but people who have her best interests in mind, but maybe aren't putting so much pressure on her to be doing all of these different things, can be very overwhelming. So helping her find one thing that she thinks she can do, instead of looking at it as she has to be doing all these different exercises, but just starting with one thing that she thinks that she can do a day, and just start there. And then once she starts to do that more frequently, she might feel like, oh, wow, I did that one thing. Let me do two things. So just very small, one thing at a time, especially for people who are just really having a hard time with not only motivation, but their physical self right now. And I think a lot of people are going through similar things. So if there's anybody that she can talk to, I'm sure there would be people here at Wellness House that she could connect with, either in a group setting, for example, to get the support and maybe the encouragement from other people who have been through something similar, to give her that acknowledgement and support to make some of those changes. Because we've seen people start from not doing anything and be able to do something through their cancer experience. And a lot of times they just need to connect with somebody else who's gone through something similar.
I was just going to piggyback off of it, because it sounds like maybe, Melissa, what your grandma's experiencing is probably pretty similar to a lot of others that are unmotivated, whether it be, whether the root of that is via their experience with the pandemic, or cancer fatigue, or any anxiety or depression from other things, right? So I think that you really touched on, I think that intersection of what we're all talking about is that what does it look like? In a lot of ways, it looks like the lack of motivation. And so, we know that there's this connection between exercise and, our emotional health and our diet. And sometimes it's about which angle do we start at, right? And so maybe the family is saying, okay, exercise is really the goal, but maybe the vessel to get there might be through, as Jaden mentioned, getting some social and emotional support. And maybe that looks like, I suggested looking through pictures. I think that there's a lot of loss and a lot of disconnection that people are experiencing during this time. And maybe, doing something that she really finds a lot of joy in can just bring up her motivation just so that she might be able to include an additional activity. Or maybe maybe she loves to have a conversation with you, right? And so sitting down and having her tell stories, or, what's her favorite meal, or, something that is a guarantee that will put a smile on her face. And then to follow that with, maybe we can do some of these sitting marches, as Jaden mentioned, right? And so that you're getting the ultimate goal, but maybe it's just to increase the motivation. And maybe it takes more than that. And so for those that are listening and recognize that maybe they need some additional support, I just really want to urge you all that you don't have to go through this alone, that there's so many resources available, Wellness House included, whether it's an individual consult or, as Jaden mentioned, a group support. Look, COVID is traumatic. The experience of a pandemic is traumatic. Cancer experiences are traumatic. So if there's some psychological or emotional struggles, that's normal, right? So if you're just coasting, that's a little bit of a head turner, right? Because it's affecting every aspect of this entire world. So no one is expected to kind of go through emotionally unscathed, right? There's going to be some type of struggles. And so just to normalize that and to say, just know you don't have to do it alone, that there's resources, available. Please check out Wellness House's website, whether it's an individual consultation by phone or by Zoom, or again, we have so many group supports. We recognize that peer support can be really helpful, especially for, young adult, get with other young adults that, have similar struggles about job loss and about school changes and things like that. That can be really powerful.
Yeah, thank you both so much. That's really great advice, and I'm definitely gonna try some of those tips. So I thank you both for mentioning the resources, and that also reminds me, so my grandma does not speak English. She's a Spanish speaker. And I was wondering if you guys also at Wellness House, I think you've mentioned this, do you have also maybe support groups that are in Spanish as well?
Yes, so I'm so glad that you asked that. We do, our program guide is it 3 months? Every 3 months we have a new program guide. And so there is a lot of recognition and intention around developing programs in Spanish. And at our current state, I'm gonna lean on my colleagues a little bit. I'm not exactly sure which programs are. I believe there's a yoga, an ongoing yoga class that is offered in Spanish. And then I believe there's some other programming that's Spanish specific, but I'm going to lean on my colleagues to help me out with that.
Yeah, and we absolutely recognize that is an area that we want to grow in, is providing Spanish support for our Spanish-speaking participants. And so you're right, Megan, we do have a Spanish yoga class that happens, I believe, every Saturday. I need to double check that. I don't know, Jaden, if you can connect with me on that, but I do think that is correct. And we are currently looking at starting to increase some offerings and connecting with experts in the field that can also provide these types of programs for us. So let me get a more up-to-date list for you. And then when we, if there is a follow-up email, Alicia and Melissa, if that can be sent out, that would be wonderful if we could do that. Mm-hmm.
Of course. So thank you so much. So going off what Angela's saying, we will be sending out a follow-up email so that everyone on the call does have access to the resources that we did just share as our speakers were presenting their information. So we'll also put in the information for the event that Angela was speaking about earlier as well. And we'll make sure that we get that list that you're mentioning, Angela, in there. I did actually have a question too for you, Angela. Just, with everything, we have such big families here in Chicago. I know I come from a family of 6. So, how do we make shared meals, exciting for not only, if we have somebody in our family that has cancer, but for the rest of the family too, so that, in a way we're supporting each other with that shared meal, but it's also a meal that benefits, the cancer patient within the family.
Absolutely. And it's such a great question, because food brings community, right? And it brings, connections, and there's so much emotion around food and socializing, and, and every household looks a bit different. And I often do come across, someone who is diagnosed who wants to start improving their intake, but either maybe find some resistance in their own household, or, so approaching it can look a little different for everyone. But what I always recommend is to get the family in on the conversation, and kind of put it out there. I want, if you're the main chef in the house, right, it can be a tricky thing to balance. And I often hear, I'm making 3 or 2 different meals, and this is, very time consuming. And, and if you're going through cancer treatment, that is a lot. It's even, a little bit more pressure to put on yourself. So I think getting the family involved and talking about, kind of the healthy foods you want to start to implement, what kind of dishes sound good to everyone. I think if it's more of a collaborative effort, it could potentially be, even if it's not everybody cooking, but even if everyone kind of has some input and thoughts around the food that is being cooked and shared, I think that's a great way to approach it. If you do have young kiddos in the house, I always encourage you to lead by example, as opposed to being a big pusher on it. If they see these foods on a continuous basis, they see you eat them and enjoy them, they may come around a bit more, but always having them around and on the table and available for them to try, and even getting them involved in the cooking process, I have seen to be a successful way to kind of get some younger kids on board. But, when it comes to sharing food for, a cancer patient, we know that those foods are going to be, nourishing foods. So will be good for the entire family. Absolutely. And, there's different ways to cook with these, different types of healthy foods, and season them and spice them up to your liking. So depending on your own, cultural background and what seasonings you use, it's always good to kind of go bold. And salt and pepper are they're so common, and of course we're going to use them, but experimenting with other different kinds of flavors is always kind of a great way to start. And when we think of variety, if we're constantly eating the same things, it gets a little boring. So really exploring new flavors and new dishes, and again, kind of getting that family in on the conversation if that's possible. Does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, definitely.
Okay.
I think that a lot of us that come from big families, we're figuring out, if we're cooking as the main cooker in the house, how do I make 2 separate meals? And then that can be costly. So trying to find ways to make it cost effective, but also beneficial for everyone. And a lot of the times it sounds like these foods are good for everyone. So it's not just for the cancer patient, but it's also, that, and I love how you were saying, bring them into the kitchen, bring them into the process and the conversation, because, you're allowing the other people in your family to understand how these foods are good for, that person that's experiencing cancer and going through the process, or even if it is, COVID and the healing process, as we've been saying too, so to me, I think you hit it on the nail for me, and it's very good advice. Did anyone else in our audience have any other questions that they wanted to ask? I know I've been asking a lot of questions, so I'd love to, at least give everyone else an opportunity as well.
I wonder if I can touch more on this loneliness pandemic, bless you, that I read about. And I actually, if anybody's interested in looking into it, it was right on the National Alliance of Mental Illness, their website. And they talked about, again, managing mental health through COVID. And they really emphasized how populations of color, African American, Asian, Indigenous populations, Latinx populations, how there was an organization called Cigna that did this huge research, and they investigated levels of loneliness, and they found that folks of color identified higher levels of loneliness. And right, so that somewhat makes sense if we're not able to see ourselves represented maybe in a workplace or in a school, in a classroom, or whatever in our daily lives, how that kind of internalizes. And mind you, this was pre-COVID, right? So if we know that there's a higher sense of kind of internalized loneliness for people of color, now COVID, right? And so although it's for safety measures and things that we need, it's for our own safety, now we're being asked to remove ourselves from our communities, our families, our, how we connect, how we can feel a sense of validation, can feel a sense of connectedness and belonging. So we are asked to no longer go to the big family dinners, the quinceañeras, or the Sweet 16 celebration, or whatever it might be, whatever cultural or whatever engagements. And so then that limits our ability to, in real time, have ourselves be validated, right? So that then what that does kind of to our sense of loneliness. And so, as we're talking about meals and gatherings and connecting, it's exactly how we are drawn to feel a sense of well-being. And my point in kind of raising all this is just to encourage all the things that have been said, but to do them maybe in a virtual sense. So can you put up your Zoom in your kitchen, right, Angela, and cook? Alongside your friends, your family? Can you share recipes that way? Can you literally eat meals together? That these are all ways to really be creative. I think people are doing a lot of things virtually, whether it's participating in live streaming concerts by your favorite musician, or, is this a time to watch a movie or a series with other cultural representation, right? So that even though you're not there, you can feel like you're a part of your favorite program. If you can see people, and another thing that I've heard people are doing is they're kind of creating their own space or in their rooms where it's kind of like a little safe haven for them, where you can either have pictures or memorabilia or something that can make you feel that sense of belonging. Maybe it's a certain smell in the household that always makes you feel, remind you of home. That there's ways you can trigger your senses to kind of bring you back. So I just wanted to highlight that.
No, thank you. I think that's such a valid and real-time thing that everyone's experiencing, and as much as there's been barriers with this virtual aspect, I feel like it's also brought about other ways that we can stay connected with our family members and friends in a way maybe we weren't doing before. So like I talk to my cousins more now than I did before because we can't see each other. And even if you don't have Zoom or have some of these things, we still all have, at least access to a phone, and we can do some, conversations over the phone, merging some people in to have a group conversation. I've heard of some folks doing watch parties together too. So they'll get on Netflix, they'll all watch the same, program or movie, and then they'll come together after and have a conversation together about it. So there is a way that we're learning to connect with others in a different way. And I think that, I would think you would agree too, if you haven't heard from somebody, even reaching out could be helpful in those senses too. If you haven't heard from a family member in a while and you don't know how they're doing, just give them a call, or even a friend, see how things are going. I've done that a few times with a couple of my friends from college that I haven't talked to in a while. So, but thank you. I think that that's a great, valid point. Does anyone else have anything else to add, or any questions, any experiences that they wanted to share? So I did kind of have like one other question, you know, like we do have, you know, flu season is coming up. So Mike and Annette, this is a little bit directed for you. You know, with flu season coming, I know that a lot of us could be anxious about it, or maybe even stressed out with how do we, you know, keep our heads, you know, in a good space while also knowing, like, you know, if we do get sick, how to manage through these things and how to really cope with maybe some of the anxiety that might be coming along with that.
That's an excellent question, Alicia. And I think that you're absolutely right that that is a big fear and creates even more uncertainty. You know, if it's not the flu, it's COVID. I think that we know that with compromised immune systems that those diagnosed with cancer are more vulnerable, right? And so, it's, you know, from a physical health standpoint, I think, you know, consulting with your oncologist and using those appointments to really get questions answered so that you're walking away feeling a sense of, you know, security, right? And so in order to do that, I think that sometimes it takes some forethought about how to walk into those appointments. And so to come in with your list of questions, and sometimes inexperience with an oncologist can feel a little bit rushed, and, you know, and so to really advocate for yourself and to say, I'd like to get these questions answered before I leave. And should I get a flu shot? And what, you know, what are my risks, so that you are really matching your concerns with what is, you know, what's the most accurate information possible. You know, and to follow, you know, the Center for Disease and Control, their guidelines, you know, as much as you possibly can. You know, there's a lot of suggestions that we've mentioned about healthy ways to, you know, practice exercise, right? And so if you can wear a mask and get out and get some fresh air, that how powerful that can be. And Jaden really highlighted those benefits and how there's a direct link to any type of movement and how that can kind of impact your well-being and your mental health. And so I think it's really about just doing the next best thing. Sometimes I think there can be this sense of feeling overwhelmed with so much uncertainty. So just people grasping for whatever they can, not knowing kind of what to do. And so it's always good to remind yourself about doing the next best thing. And maybe that is make a list of questions for when you go for your next oncology appointment. And if it's something that you can do, I say, call up your clinic and ask right away. You know, if you're noticing that the anxiety is growing and you have the ability to call the clinic and ask your list of questions ahead of time, by all means, that's advocating for yourself. That's your right as a patient, right? Or maybe it's through the email, if you can reach your oncologist that way. That if it's causing you anxiety, then that's enough of a reason to try to act on it. Now, you can't control how quickly they respond or whether they have the answers, but to try to figure out what is within your control, right? And we have to kind of backstep and say, well, in order to do that, we need to figure out what's kind of at the root, right? And so there needs to be some self-awareness. And all of these things can happen when we are being more mindful, when we're being more intentional, when we're kind of in the present moment. And so that's always kind of step one, is trying to do your best to ground yourself. And whether that means talking to a therapist, you know, if it's managing depression and anxiety, if medication is needed, if it's talking to a friend, you know, if it's participating in a group support, you know, it depends on kind of the continuum of how you're feeling. But the key is that you don't have to do it alone, and that there's help available.
Thank you. I think you touched on some very valid points that are going to be helpful for, you know, what's ahead of us at this point. So, well, at this time, I wanted to, you know, if anyone else had any last minute questions, if any of the speakers had any other information they wanted to provide. I think we're kind of getting to the tail end and we can start wrapping things up, but I wanted to at least, if anyone had any last minute remarks that they'd like to add in, any questions.
I actually do have another question for you, Angela. So with the treatment that my grandma is going through right now, one of the side effects is that she has a lot of sores on her tongue and her mouth, which are very painful for her. And just within a few days, she went from having an appetite, a pretty regular appetite throughout the day, to just not wanting to eat anymore because of how painful her sores are. And so I've been looking into different things that she could eat, and I know that we're trying to avoid anything with spices, or even things that are too salty, or things like that. And I was wondering if you could share any tips, or any foods that you know of that would be good for her.
Absolutely. Mouth sores present such a challenge to eat during treatment, and the severity can range throughout treatment. And the things you mentioned, avoiding a lot of heavy, anything really heavily spiced or just spicy, the salty, anything really acidic could also be irritating. Anything that's very hot and just temperature. So focusing more on kind of more room temperatured foods, because that heat can also present a little bit more of an irritation. But you want to think soft, bland. And so if that means, I'm not sure if she's cooking for herself, or you or your family are making meals for her. But I think having a food processor in a time like this is very, very helpful, because then you can get a really nice kind of smooth texture on specific foods. Avoiding foods that are very dry, and sharp, because also that can be very irritating. And also looking at sometimes cold items are soothing to those that are experiencing mouth sores, but that can look different for some people. So some people find that even, things like popsicles or can be helpful. And if you find that cold food is helpful for her, Melissa, you can turn so many things into popsicles. You can make your own kind of either kind of like smoothies and turn those into popsicles. If she is consuming any kind of nutritional beverages like Boost or Ensure, you can turn those into popsicles. If swallowing liquids presents to be a challenge, seems to be a challenge for her. But some go-to foods that I tend to find that it can be successful for some people are any kind of mashed potato. It's peel them, and they're softer in texture, and you have a range of your different potatoes, but those are nice and soft, and they're a good calorie boost. Same with any kind of winter squashes. So if she does like kind of butternut squash, it has good calories, but also can be nice and soft and pureed. And I can send you also just a handout, and we can even talk further if you want to connect on behalf of your grandma. But those are some just tips off the bat that I hope can be helpful. But please let me know if we can connect further. I'd be happy to.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yes, I will definitely follow up with you. And
Okay.
and anything you can share, we can also share with everyone on this call. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. And I always like to meet with people, when I do a consult, I like background. So I would love to kind of hear what food your grandma likes and how can we alter those textures, right? And so I would like to talk further about that. Those are more kind of overview generic tips, but I kind of like to get more into detail. So I would love to connect further with you on that.
I just have to say your love for your grandma is just so precious and endearing. It's just like melting my heart, Melissa. So she's in good hands. She is loved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're a really big family. So we're kind of all just focusing on her right now.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys so much.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. I did put up our contact information as well as wellness houses on our screen, just so that if you guys wanted to take them down, you could. But, you know, I think that today everyone touched on some really great, important facts and points to help us through this difficult time. And, you know, Melissa, it takes a village, you know, and, you know, banding together is the best way to support each other at these times, you know, whether it's in a family setting or in a professional setting, and then even trying to get these information and resources out to folks, you know. So I'm very appreciative. I know Chicago Check, we're very happy that you guys were able to join us today. We're happy for all of our guests that were able to join us today as well. But with that, I would like to go ahead and close off our session for today. So thank you very much for everyone for joining us.
Thank you.
Take care and have a wonderful rest of your afternoon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank
Thank you.
you.